Uh, Welcome everyone to our webinar today on breaking bad FMEA habits. I'm sure we've all seen a few bad habits in the past as it relates to doing FMEAs, and Jose and myself will be giving you a nice little overview and discussion over some of these topics today. And I think what's paramount to breaking bad FMEA habits, the old adage of using computer software and different things as garbage in and garbage out as it applies to what can be created with an FMEA is very relevant, right? If you think about what we put into the FMEA, obviously equals in greater proportion to what comes out of it. And so, if you want to detox, as our comment here, if you want to detox your bad FMEA habits, then perhaps walking through some of our discussion points that we're going to have today might be relevant to you. And I'm sure, as many of you have over the years experienced most of these bad habits, as we all have to a greater or lesser extent, sometimes just kind of openly discussing them and understanding them, I think, has a great deal of relevance to kind of keeping them fresh in your mind and how your teams can interact, with your FMEA and your with your systems. And so that's kind of our focus element of garbage in, garbage out, and we'll kind of address that along the way today in our discussion together. And so with that,
and I remember being an FMEA user that there was a lot of comments on that, right? If your FMEA team does not put an effort to your FMEA, really it's just going to be garbage in, and that's what you're going to get out. But if your team puts effort and they get engaged in the FMEA discussions, you'll see that the content is going to be much better at the end. So this is one of the things that we want to try to deal in this webinar. We're going to try to go through some of those bad habits and see how we can fix them. And also, we're going to talk just a little bit about our solutions and how can they help you.
Exactly. Thanks for that comment, Jose. And then we'll do a little intro now that we have an understanding of what we plan to cover in the webinar, of who your presenters are today.
All right. So if you want me to start it.
Yeah, if you want to, next slide, I guess. Yeah.
All right. So can you see our pictures?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Let me see. Should be. In my screen, I'm showing the pictures. I don't know if it's just me or.
Here it is. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
For those of you that don't know, we're running a new version of Teams format for the webinar. So bear with us as we work through some technology enhancements, if you will. So always a challenge with technology. So yeah, go ahead, Jose. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Jose Avalos, and I don't know if you heard of the new AG and VDA handbook. I participated with that team. I've been, I started my career as a manufacturing engineer back in 1999. So been quite a while in the automotive industry. I worked with ATF 16949. Had a lot of audits during my time as an engineer. A lot of working with the APKP engineers, continuous improvement, and the latest achievement was to participate with the FMEA handbook from AAG and VDA. And now I'm part of the Peak Avenue family, which now we are 4 companies in one, since about probably a year and a half. Yeah, so I leave the place to Ted.
Yeah, again, thanks and welcome everyone for attending. I'm Ted Siklankis. Actually, I didn't realize it, Jose, but I think we have about the same start date in industry. So I started in quality engineering in 1999 after finishing my degree. Worked in defense sector for a period of time, and then the bulk of my career was in the automotive industry in the tier one supply base. Worked into positions as quality manager, project engineering supervisor, and then some sales and purchasing activities later on before drifting into the software world, which that occurred, I guess, about almost 12 years ago now. And so, my transition into the software sector basically occurred from implementing systems. Starting actually in 1999, I implemented an SPC system plant-wide, and then other systems along the way for doing APQP activities, non-conformance activities, document management systems, all of the typical quality systems, data collections and metrology and so forth. So that's how I kind of evolved into the role I am today with Peak Avenue. So, but for the most part, we're not really going to be showing or demonstrating software. We'll comment along the way on areas where we think software might be of benefit to some of these discussion points. But in general, we really just kind of want to discuss some steps of how to improve your FMEA and typical problems. All right. So that's
All
our
right.
intro.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you can see right now. I'm showing the 8 habits we're going to be talking about. So this is the 8 items we want to touch base on. We're not going to read them because we're going to go through each one of them slide by slide. So if you have comments, questions, there is a section here where you can see where you can put your questions, and if we don't have any time to answer them during this webinar, we'll be able to answer them after the webinar. So feel free to post any questions or say hi if you guys want. All right, so I'm going to go to my next slide, and this is the first habit. Just an introduction. The first point is doing FMEA alone with or with the wrong team. I've been there. If you see the picture, there is one person standing in a meeting room, and there's full of teammates that are basically ghosts. So I've been there. I've been in places where I call up for a meeting, and then nobody shows up, or you're in there with one person and really nothing is going on. So we need collaboration, and that's one of the bad habits that sometimes happens in organizations, but it is a reality. Sometimes FMEA practitioners end up doing the FMEA by themselves, which is something that shouldn't happen. We should have the collaboration between all the different cross-functional teams in there. So Ted, do you have any questions regarding this point?
Yeah, I mean, from my a little bit of experience, I guess, you know, how do you see, when you start out doing something like this on your own, as we often have. I know I've mapped out FMEAs and control plans and other documents where I almost have them 80% complete sometimes before, I could finally get the team together to actually go through it and get some input or drive some input. But what are your views on like the quality of risk assessment without collaboration? I mean, what are your thoughts there, Jose?
I think it's you get some, because sometimes products are developed from previous products. Sometimes you get some information is not that bad, but at the end, not having the collaboration from all the different cross-functional teams, you still end up finding out later on in the process that you are missing information. And this is what we want to avoid, right? To having to rework an FMEA just because somebody starts reading it and then later on they found out it didn't have the information didn't get into the FMEA. The other thing that happens is that you do your FMEA by yourself because nobody wants to collaborate, and then you released it, and later on there comes a customer reject, and it could be just a small thing, but it could go all the way to something like a recall. And when that happens, everybody is going to turn your face and look at you and see, well, you did an FMEA. Well, this isn't considered in the FMEA. And really, I mean, what can you say? Nobody attended the meetings. Nobody came to look at the information. So that's really bad. And that has happened to me. I used to be a process FMEA moderator, and I ended up doing FMEAs by myself. And then when the rejects came from the customer, I mean, what can you answer? Because you really sometimes you were only copy and pasting stuff, and you ended up, feeling bad for yourself. But also, how can you explain to your management that nobody attended just because they were doing some other activities? So yeah, that's something that happens, right?
Oh,
What do you think
yeah,
then?
yeah, for sure. For sure that that definitely happens. The other thing I guess I'd comment on this before moving on is, obviously today mo so many companies are doing more remote collaboration, right? And so, you know, what are your thoughts or experience as it relates to tools that might benefit, remote collaboration or, reviewing, the FMEA together? Do you have any perspectives that you can share there based on your experience?
hmm So back in the day, we didn't have any tools that could communicate remotely. Right now, and the tool that we use, and you can look at it. It's called Eins. It's a cloud-based tool that in real time you can see your FMEA while the other person is writing something on the FMEA. Both of them can collaborate. You can do your meetings via web, and information will drop in automatically, which is something that it didn't existed back in the day. Everybody was just working either in a meeting room or just doing your FMA in silos. But we have so many tools that we're talking about FMEA tools, but also there's other tools out on the web that you can use. I mean, for example, there's Google Documents that you can also use to write your minutes, or I mean, there's a bunch of tools now that have been out in the market. Some of them are even free to use, which are really good to collaborate. Which is, I mean, technology is really advancing into going into collaborations, which is, I think it's very good.
No, I would agree. I think, it's one of those things, pick a tool, figure out how to use it, create a process around it, and be consistent, right?
Mm. Um,
Okay.
so should we go to the next point, Jeff?
Yeah, I think we covered that point on
Or,
collaboration. I'm sure there's going to be some crossover in our discussion, but yeah. So yeah, this one is probably one of my favorites, or maybe my least favorite. Depends which one. It depends on your viewpoint of this one. It actually is kind of both of my favorites all in one, right? It's that double-edged sword of it cuts both ways type of mindset. And so yeah, copying and pasting, right? I know when I first started doing FMEAs and they were all in Excel, and literally we would file our project file folder in a drawer. And there was different color coded folders. The FMEA was a color, the control plan was a color, all of our documents were different colors in like the project file folder. And so it was literally a filing system. But the first thing we would always do is go dig out a similar FMEA from a past project and literally copy it and start looking at what was different, right? What are the features that are different? What are the tolerances that are different? And try and make those edits. But it was literally a copy and paste exercise. And I understand why we all do that. And I also understand, the value of doing it that way. But there again, there are some inherent, problems with the copy and paste mindset. And I think what we try to communicate, especially when we're consulting and training with our clients, that utilize software platforms, is what I refer to as controlled copy and paste, right? Utilizing something that is essentially a controlled template for the basis of certain processes or certain design criteria, to where you have a foundation to go back to, and you can actually see what kind of iterations along the way you've engaged and edited and modified. The risk you run with the old school Excel copy and paste, I think, is, outdated data, right? If you look at maybe some tolerances, or maybe if you're looking at process FMEAs and process handling, there could have been updates to machine controllers. There could be updates to, different work handling or different things on the line, and taking something old that may or may not have been updated, um, does have some inherent, risk in it from that standpoint. I think the other thing is built in with that is a false sense of security that, hey, it worked before, so it's going to work again. And many times it does. Uh, but are you taking the right steps proactively to kind of look at what has changed since then? Uh, and then the other point, I think, really, and we could probably go on all day with this, but missed opportunities for improvements. So, if you're just taking something old and repurposing it, are you actually giving it a fresh set of eyes on the process, to where you can kind of look at, what may have changed, what may be working better, um, what may have changed from a requirements standpoint, or whether that be customer, whether that be, ISO, ITF, the list kind of goes on and on in terms of, what impact might have gotten missed along the way. So um, those are my thoughts on copying and pasting. So on one hand, I think it can be very good when done properly and controlled in a way that is kind of templated and controlled. On the flip side, the age-old method of literally copy and paste does have some inherent risks built in, and it's just difficult to see when you're looking in rows and columns, uh, the unique aspects of something that needs to be changed. I don't know if you got what your thoughts are. Uh,
Yeah. So I think there's an analogy a colleague from Germany told me once, and it really got me thinking about copying and pasting. This is where the quality engineer role comes in play, right? He told me normally in an airplane you have a pilot and a co-pilot. So the job of the pilot is to lead the airplane, to set everything, but you have a co-pilot, and the co-pilot has to make sure that everything that the pilot does is done properly. So if we're gonna copy and paste, we need somebody else to look at our copy and pasting information. So if you have a co-pilot, like a quality engineer that can go in and take a look at what you just copy and pasted and see if they can find mistakes, this is perfect. And this is why we have to collaborate between the two of us and make sure that if you're going to be copy and pasting, and um, they can if they can help you find out and you don't copy a mistake, because it can be costly. Copying and pasting and without really looking at the information that you copy and paste could be really costly at the end, because there might be something that you wrote that shouldn't be there. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I would agree with the four eyes kind of principle, and I do like the co-pilot and the pilot kind of strategy. One I used to use is kind of like a horse with blinders on. You think you're going in the right direction, but if you can't see out of the side of your eyes, then you really don't know what else exists in the world. So you're just going in one direction, and you think you're doing the right thing. And it's not that anyone has any wishes to do the wrong thing. It's just that sometimes we can be a little hyper focused and misguided. There was a little comment in the chat, and I think I'll just go ahead and address it since we're here. It
Sure.
says, I'm interested to hear what you feel are best practices for ensuring that we do not miss those risk areas when using templates and copies. Do you have any thoughts on that chat comment, Jose?
Well, it all depends. If you're going to use templates, it all depends how much information you want to put in it. I always suggest to anyone using templates, for those of you that are here that don't know what templates are, templates is really the base of family FMEAs. My advice always is to put the least information that you can put in your template that would be generic to every other spin-off FMEAs that you will have. The reason is if you start putting a lot of information, like you copy recommended actions and names, you might gonna end up reworking there from the templates. Our software has like 4 different ways of copying and pasting. We have the normal copy and paste, copy as a link. We can clone an item, and then we have the templates, which is the one that allows you to do variants of your FMEAs with an external database. So it is, at least we know we have a lot of solutions to do that. Yeah.
All right. I think
All
that
right.
was pretty well covered. Thanks, Jose. And yeah, I think we'll move on to our next big item.
All right. So the next one will be scoring severity, occurrence, and detection inconsistently. And um, this is something that it has happened to me a lot of times. And basically, what you were doing FMEAs in Excel, this happens a lot. You have similar severities or the same wording in severities in different FMEAs, but you have different ratings. And if you're just putting a number because you know uh, you have to be there, sometimes you're just guessing, and sometimes this is what FMEA teams does. They guess. Okay, so for us this is an 8, and then you go to a different team. They have the same severity rating, and for them it's an 8 or a 10. And if somebody comes in and looks at your FMEAs, let's say a customer or maybe an auditor, and they found out this, they're going to write a major. That's a major nonconformity. So we just have to make sure that we can cover this. And for that, I think, Ted, what do you think? Do we have a solution for this that can help
Yeah,
us?
yeah, I'd say you know, utilizing a software system similar to ours does have a some built-in functionality to assist with this and even highlight where inconsistencies actually exist. In our case, uh, if we have severities at a higher level system and we're looking at something in a lower level system that feeds into that system, if we have inconsistent severities, it will actually highlight and color code those, for instance, in red for differences. And so, it actually brings to your attention areas that are actually inconsistent rankings and scoring, which I think is a nice way to kind of visualize areas that you need to work on that, you just might have missed. Or maybe you didn't miss it, but if you have different teams working in different areas of an FMEA or different processes, or however you have those subdivided, sometimes those other groups don't look at maybe the interactions between the higher and lower level system elements as closely as they should, and in those respects, just might miss something, right? Again, you're combing through these rows and columns. For instance, let's say you're in Excel today, and it's just hard to pick up on where those differences lie. I mean, you really have to be super thorough. I mean, you almost have to be like an auditor for accounting or something, where you're going after the last decimal place, looking for the T's to be crosses and the I's dotted. And I think with the complexity of some systems, that's where, whether you're looking at a piece of software like ours, or there's others on the market as well that help highlight some of these discrepancies. I think it goes a long way to creating a better system, because if you go back to our previous comment on copying and pasting, you might copy and paste. In our world, we call it a system element, but it might be a different process or operation or different subcomponent that feeds into a different design. But that system element, if it's copied over, you're going to make those connectors into the higher level system, and And so then if you're not using a software system, you may not know, where that disparity exists if you're, utilizing Excel or something else like that to where, you just have to pay attention and realize what you did and go look at the other system that you're linking this to. It can be done. It's just obviously a lot more labor intensive. I think, you know, the other thing you might run into, and I don't know what your thoughts are, Jose, is that you may run into inconsistent decision making. If you look at prevention and detection, from my perspective, you might actually wind up implementing different detection systems at the plant or different areas because the teams aren't ranking and scoring things consistently. And so maybe in one area of the plant, you wind up with, an elaborate vision system. At the other end of the plant, maybe there's just some visual detection. And then at some point in the future, you have a failure that slips out to a customer and, and then, you're putting an action item in for, doing something that if you were looking at things from a systemic standpoint or, cross process similar systems, you might have identified that, had your scoring and inputs been more consistent. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, that can occur, right? That being inconsistent, you can end up with one recommended action for one, and the other one had nothing because the scoring was different. So it is very important that we consider that we are consistent in our three ratings. One thing that I wanted to mention is that in this new AAG and VDA handbook, we switch from being quantitative on the occurrence side to be qualitative. So this is a little bit better now to score because you don't have to be looking at numbers like uh, PPT numbers for your occurrence. Instead, the team has to agree on a number, and that makes the analysis a little bit easier. And our software also has some functionalities where you can copy the actions on the same type of failure cause. Um, it auto-populates them, so it makes it easier to choose an occurrence and detection value based on the same actions that you have, because sometimes you end up with different preventive or detective actions, and that makes the ratings go different in the different failure modes. So um, yeah, so I think we should move on to the next
Yeah,
point. All right. So this one, Ted.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So I think we've, as with all the other problems, this is another one that we probably experienced at one point or another if you've been doing FMEAs longer than a year, and which is treating it as a one-time task, right? So you're in project mode, you're in project launch mode, you're cranking out your documents, you're getting all your APQP project binder. Well, when I first started, the binder literally was a binder, so with the fold out 11 by 17 sheets. So dating myself a little bit, but in any case, but an FMEA is a one-time task, right? And so, again, here it's, a task done once is never truly done, right? So if you do it once, you fill it out, you're doing your copy and paste and, your quick calculations, and then, you know, anything done from it has a tendency to it's going to come back around to haunt you at some point, right? Something's going to come back around and kind of get you. And I think this is where a lot of discussion and the implementation of even like reverse FMEAs have kind of stemmed from, which is kind of, you know, take it out to the plant. I know when I was a quality manager and I'd have a finding or something, my first question, if it wasn't the first question, it was at least the second question, which was, asking one of my engineers, did you go out in the plant and did you see it for yourself? And I think that's kind of where the RF reverse FMEAs and looking at FMEAs for a one-time task stem from is, have you gone out there and truly kind of walked it and reviewed it, gone through, looked at it again, whether it's from it went through an engineering change or whatever process change may have occurred, have you gone back and looked at some of those points of connections to change, and revisited the content to make sure it's up to date, it's revisited, even from a new launch, of going from the pre-launch prototype phase to series production, or wherever you're at, taking that walk, making it sure that it matches and aligns with things, is very important. But often overlooked from that standpoint. And again, I think you wind up in a potential scenario where you have an outdated risk assessment, because you started out quick and you did it once, um, you know, and risks, unfortunately, that may have been reduced also have the potential of becoming a common risk factor, uh, you know, if it's not revisited and looked at and compared to, current process systems. If you look at it, more than once and kind of revisit it with the team. Um, your thoughts on this one, Jose, or any
Yeah.
questions?
So one thing I wanted to mention is that there should be a timing that we should revisit them. Normally, if your FMEA it's already been launched and you have it ready to run, I think the requirement is to have it a review once a year. I know with our FMEA, you have to be doing maybe even more often, depending on how you set up your reverse FMEA process. But at least once a year, you can do it. And we have on our header, there is a date there that it's not common on every, at least not on the handbook. And in this date, you can use it to set a date where you want to review your FMEA. And that's something that I haven't seen on the normal headers on your FMEA, but that's one that we have at least on our software that it's there. And we can use it for sure to have us remind us ourselves when do we need to review it. I know when there's an audit, everyone wants to review their FMEA before the audit, and sometimes we're running just to review it because the auditor is going to come and we don't know if there's something wrong there or there's an open action. So, but at least we should have a process when to review them. And reverse FMEA, it's a perfect way to do it because you set up a process, you set up dates, and that's when you go in. So yeah, for sure, there are many ways to achieve a review and not have it as a one-time task. All right, so
Sounds good.
let's go to the next one. Vague or generic failure modes. I think sometimes we fall into this where we put vague description of our failure modes. And one thing that I wanted to mention in this one, there's a step that wasn't that much used in the US. And you could tell in the AIG fourth edition worksheet, FMEA spreadsheet, that you only had one column for functions. And in this new handbook, step number 3 got introduced. And if you look at the new worksheet for FMEAs, it has 3 columns for functions. So why do we have so many columns for functions? And this is something, I guess, for North America, it's kind of new. We were used more into having only one column for functions, and for process FMEAs, they were just an item column. So the reason being is in order to have failure modes in our FMEAs, we need to deduct it from somewhere. And in order, failure modes are, what can go bad, but we need the function part of it. We need to know what we need to do to be okay. So that's what a function does. It tells you how do you want your product or your process to work or to do things. And then from there you can deduct your failure modes, and that's how you don't become vague or generic. I've seen a lot of times I go into training or going into a company and look at their FMEAs, and I see this failure mode that it's on process FMEAs. where it says damage component. And I always ask, because this is something that if you show it to a customer or to an auditor, they will immediately tell you what's the damage. Is it a cosmetic damage? Is it a functional damage? Is it, what kind of damage occur and where did it occur? So this is very big. This is very generic. If you use it, you're going to end up with a lot of questions. So if you have functions that lead you to a failure mode that it's more strict, and it'll lead you to put some failure mode that is not baked, I think that's perfect. And what do you think, Ted? How do we do this in our solution? Putting functions in different levels and deducting failure
Yeah.
modes.
I think a couple things. One, we have a very structured approach to how we create, functions and failures. We also, and there's other software systems that do as well, but cataloging. So, if you look at, I think, specific processes, whether that be machining or injection molding or stamping or, whatever, casting, you can go on and on, electronics. They all have a very unique set of potential failures. And I think, and I did this years ago, mainly more so around fixing a corrective action problem, but really looking at all the potential, failures and all the potential, functions of different systems, and really kind of mapping them out, almost making it a unique catalog. And in that way, you can bring those in, as needed based on those particular systems, system elements, and functions, and then trickle down into the failures. I think sometimes when people are kind of compressed and going back to the old Excel world, they're trying to populate a document in some cases more so than they're trying to get creative and elaborate with the functions and the failures. And I think that's where a lot of the historical generic terms and content kind of originate from. But I think it's almost like creating those breakout sessions to where we can catalog these and make these effective. Because then, if they're cataloged and effective and unique, they can also be used. Those process functions and failures can be used across multiple products or production lines. And if you are using a software system like ours that has a database behind it, when you get into querying this information for future issues or future failures or corrective actions, you can literally look up a specific and unique cause or failure across multiple platforms, multiple production lines, and see where the impact is and the changes occur, which is just not a tool you have at your disposal, in other, let's say, paper Excel-based systems. I mean, without doing some really creative, Visual Basic and programming. So those are some of my thoughts as it relates to that. I think the other thing is you also run the risk, with these generic failure modes of, obviously you're hiding risk. That's why the auditor wants to bring attention to it. You don't really know where your risk lies, right? It's like, oh, damaged parts are no good, but you know what you don't know what you can say, well, it's handling, right? And then you go back to my favorite corrective action, which is like operator training. Oh, the operator dropped it, it's damaged, right? And it's like it's so generic. It's, you can't train all the operators 20 times. And so it's one of those things that just takes a little extra effort. And if you have a tool that, once you put the effort in, then it becomes easy to kind of reuse that data from that standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me go to my next point, just because I think we're on time. So,
Yeah.
Ted, do you wanna?
Yeah. I'll start off with this one. But yeah, and the next point of FMEA issues is ignoring or delaying recommended actions, right? And so, we've all seen the action column in FMEAs that we have to, address. Historically, that was driven by, a specific RPN score. Most of my world, it was always like historically 125 and over, or whatever the the magic number was for the RPN to trigger an action item. In some cases, we would also trigger an action item based on some form of necessity that we saw risk in if we'd identified it. But I think that the biggest problem historically was tracking these action items, making sure that they actually get done on time as the project launch dates occur. And I think probably even a bigger problem is looking at action items or creating action items down the road when you actually revisit the FMEA, or unless you didn't revisit it, and creating actions out of customer feedback or other issues. Going back to my old project binder and folding out the FMEA or the action item list on the 11 by 17 paper, and going through it and having a project meeting and going, hey Jose, did you finish this poke for the production line XYZ? My other colleague, Tom, did you do this? And you're like, you're manually trying to track and hunt people down. Did the maintenance department close out this action item for a PLC programming change? And so it was really kind of like, I don't know, almost like herding cats sometimes to close out the action items. You're kind of, as one colleague told me, just, keep your arms down low to the ground and keep moving, and you're going to get them all going in one direction. And so, this creates issues because closing out the action items obviously should reduce and will reduce your risk and impact, positive impact to the plant. Uh, Reduce failure slipping out to the customer. I mean, the list goes kind of on and on in terms of ensuring that they're closed out effectively. And there again, it kind of comes down to that we've got so much going on today, so much information and things that we have to work on. I think it just becomes apparent that having a tool to help us facilitate these action items and closing them out just makes a ton of sense in many ways. And I don't know, maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit, Jose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our tool help us. At least there's two type of things that you can do. So you can put actions directly on the FMEA, and we have something called a newsletter that would come and will let you know if you have a recommended action so that you won't delay it. And this newsletter will go out into your management and to your FMEA team. There's other actions that are outside of your FMEA that if you want to handle them as a project, you develop your actions. There's in this module that we call actions, which is kind of like a Gantt chart, and you can put actions there, and those actions will go immediately into the user, and you can track them, and you can follow up directly on those actions. So there's at least two things that our software does, and there's it allows you to track recommended actions, but you have a tons of reports also that will help you get recommended actions and how can you follow them up. So not only those automated ones that exist in the software, but there's also a way to extract the information and put it into a report. And you can share that report to your colleagues or to anyone that has a recommended action directly. Or you can even track your own recommended actions. If you want to track your own recommended action, there is a way to do it. Or you can track everyone in the database to see where they are at the recommended actions. The other thing that I wanted to mention is delaying recommended actions happens. I won't tell you which product it was, but you might get it. You might imagine we used to have this product where you use a bearing ball. This bearing ball was metal. Then we introduced ceramic, and then we introduced different diameters of the bearing ball, and we delayed it. We thought maybe, well, maybe nothing is going to happen, and we delayed put in a recommended action, and we ended up with very bad products because the brain balls don't work similarly, even though sometimes they were even the same diameter but with a different material, and that made it like something bad, and we had to recall all of our products. So don't delay your recommended actions. There's these tools that we have that will help you do that. All right,
All right.
so
Thanks for that, Jose.
let me
I
go
think
to
we
the
got one last little topic before we kind of wrap up and maybe
wrap
address
up.
some
Yeah.
Q&A.
Yeah, so we have the focusing on RPN, and this is something that we can see on our management. Sometimes our managements they go into that they still think RPNs are what should drive recommended actions, but that's changed with the new handbook. And if you notice at our example, in the past, if you see the number, you see that we had 100 threshold, anything above 100, you would put an action, but you would prioritize based on the higher number. And if you look at our example, something with severity 2, which might be something cosmetical issue or something, and it would end up with a very high number, you would put here first the action instead of putting it into the one with the high severity. And that changed in the new manual. You have now, if you see, the one that has the highest priority would be the multiplication, the one that has the high severity instead of the one with the lower severity. So we have to focus now instead of taking RPNs, and we have to teach our teams into take now action priority. We do have tables in the software. So Ted, do you want to talk a little bit about what we have in the software?
Yeah, certainly. I can talk about the software a bit. So, but I guess I'll give you a funny question. So, you're not an advocate then of playing like RPN roulette, where you spin the wheel to get the lowest number? That's not a recommended plan?
We used to do that a lot, just like play. We used to play with numbers, so we would get always go below 100, and we didn't put an action for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I just wanted to check, see if I was the only crazy guy out there.
got it.
Um, but no, what we have, and other systems do as well. So I just want to constantly highlight what we're doing. But we have different configurable tables as it relates to the action priority, and so we can kind of structure, what's important to you or your customer. Certain customer specific requirements have, certain AP tables that they want you to adhere to, and you can kind of configure each one different to each project, or even I think, if I'm not mistaken, even down to the system element level. So it can be even like deeper into the project. You have to be kind of careful with that so how you're ranking one system element versus another one. But in principle, it's very configurable and easy to map to your project. So it can be, unique in that specific project. You can then visualize that AP table. And so, and I guess in hindsight, maybe we should have put a little snapshot of the software here where, our AP table and graph, it's kind of got, the red and yellow and green is all mapped out, but in each square has like the quantity of items that are actually, meeting that AP requirement. So if there's one that like the top right corner, there's like super high AP, you can like literally click on it. And if there's 10 items in it, it'll highlight what those 10 are. And you can actually see the content for those 10. You can jump right into the FMEA behind those 10. And that's just a really quick down and dirty way to, kind of jump into and see and visualize, what your risks are, as opposed to the RPN, roulette system a little bit. And, Jose's example here, it's very simple, but it totally illustrates, the shift from RPN to AP and why it matters. I mean, one is a lower number, but a much higher severity ranking, which indicates a safety critical potential failure, which is, you know, a risk that's quite noteworthy and worth, another set of eyes on it. So uh, it was a move in the right direction. I'll be honest, when I first saw the change, I'm like, oh, what are we trying to fix now? And is it really going to fix anything? Or are we just, is this just, kind of like a lot of quality systems where we're putting a Band-Aid on top of something because people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing? But the more I dug into the AP system, I'll be honest, I've become more of a believer, even though maybe in day one I wasn't. But we're all guilty of not wanting to change immediately. So
Yeah, it took 3 months to develop. the whole thing. So
Yeah.
imagine that everybody was fighting against, where do we put HMs and
Yeah.
lows? Uh, but yeah, so okay, so we have one last item, and we'll go quickly so that we can have Q&As. Uh, the, there's a new step on this FMEA is called the preparation step, which is step number 1. And this is where we go into the scope phase. And Ted, do you want to talk a little bit about scope and what do we have on our
Yeah,
software?
yeah. No, no, no. I'll certainly comment on it. The reality is, when you're scoping out a project, and maybe your FMEA is, for a unique process or a unique design element, uh, understanding the scope, and I'll be honest, historically, I did not do a great job of looking at the scope of something. I was like kind of more project fixated on getting the tool, getting the gauge, and things like that. But I think it if done well, it points you in the right direction of understanding, the key elements behind, what you want to do with this process or product, and ensuring that your FMEA is pointed in the right direction as well. So you're looking at the right functions, you're looking at the right failures, uh, and their interactions with other components or process lines in your plant. Where if you kind of just take a generic approach to it without a true, thinking about what the scope truly is, one, you wind up not getting enough information, and so you come up short. The other scenario is you wind up with scope creep, so you're like creeping into other systems and places, and and then everything kind of gets watered down, and you're not really looking at it from the unique vantage point that you're supposed to be looking at it. And so, yeah, it has a ton of merit. And since we're short on time, I'll probably just kind of wrap up there. And if Jose, if you got any other kind of parting
No,
comments on that.
just I think that has happened to me where the project just starts growing and growing because we didn't consider the first step, which is preparing. So we do have a very good solution there. We have the Gantt chart, which is in a module called actions. If you want to take a look at it later, feel free to ask for a demo, and we can for sure help you. Questions that we have maybe, or I don't know where.
We've got there's 3 Q&A sessions that I've seen some pop up. I'll kind of read through them here. Should the failure modes be specifically tied to the product and process specification requirements, especially critical requirements?
Yep. So the requirements are actually tied with functions, and for sure you can deduct your failure modes from the functions. So it is there is a link between the 3 items, between the failure modes, the function, and the requirements. And we have our software allows us to put specifications or requirements, and from there they're tied to a function, and from there we can deduct failure mode, and then we can deduct preventive and detective actions. So for sure, there is a connection between those.
Yeah,
The
I
other,
think it just depends how you want to look at it, really,
yeah.
or where, what view you want to take on it.
So the other one says review an PFMEA is a continuous process that has not end until mass production end. All improvement tasks must be updated on the PFMEA. It is a live document. So do you want to comment on that, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously I would agree wholeheartedly with that, based on some of our discussion points. So yeah, it's as Jose alluded to in that one of our steps here is that we want to look at a timer or a mechanism to revisit our FMEAs, make sure, it is a live process that, whatever is going on in the plant is aligning with, what your FMEA is doing today. And with the right tools to kind of guide you in that way, it does kind of make that easier. So yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with that comment. And then the last one about the FMEA as CEF, forms. How does the Peak Avenue software support different forms and customer requiring different forms? Let's see how solution tool software support this way. The way I think that what's unique about a database system, and obviously I've got experience with multiple ones, but in this case, EINS, we configure a lot of the information behind the scenes with functions, failures, and so forth. And so we kind of link those together, and then it populates the form sheet. And so the form sheets to us are really, for the most part, more of a display tool. There are things you do in the form sheet like you would in Excel, and it looks very much like Excel, but behind the scenes things are done in the database. And so it doesn't really matter what form you're looking at. It could be the new AIG VDA form sheet, or it could be the old fourth edition, form sheets, and it will take that same data and populate either form. Obviously, there would be some gaps from the fourth edition to the AIG VDA, and then you would have to address the gaps that are unique to that form. But fundamentally, the main data points transfer. So for us, we don't really care what form sheet it is. We can work with it even within the same project. I don't know if you have any other comments on that one, Jose.
So I think we have been requested a few times just to look at different forms, and it normally the form that we have is the generic one. But if you want to look at an ENF, we can certainly quote that in case that a customer is asking for a specific form. In the out-of-the-box software, we normally have the generic one, which is the one that comes in the FMEA. But if you need to present something in a different form, that's something that it's not common in the software. You use generic information, but we can definitely work on getting something per the needs of customer or the needs of somebody asking for a different form. That's something that we can do.
Yep. And I'd say, again, like you mentioned, Jose, if anyone has any specific ask or something that you'd like to see from us, I mean, reach out. We're happy to evaluate any form sheets or questions, or, even show you what some of your stuff would look like in the software. And we'd be happy to set up a little demo or, a meeting with either one of us. So just feel free to reach out.
Yeah. All right. So with this, I think we can end the webinar. Feel free to contact us if you need.
Yeah.
And
thanks everyone for attending. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Thanks for your
everyone for
time.
attending. Yeah.
Have a great day.
Have a great one. Yeah. Have a good one. Thanks.